Hello and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports. For today's 5 things learned from the round 18 of the United Rugby Championship, the final round of the group stages. We do have our top 8, we do have our quarterfinalists confirmed, and we now can a bit of reflect on the last 18 rounds. They were played from about September through to now, so it's been a long time. We're looking at about 8 months worth of rugby. And we've learned a lot over the course of the season, and some teams really have improved, some teams have really not improved. For the South African perspective, it's another 3 teams into the playoffs, and we're sort of going to wait and see how far they can go. Unfortunately, we are going to see Stormers and the Bulls taking each other on in one of the quarterfinals, so we can only have a maximum of 2 South African teams in the semi-finals. We already get that far. But I want to go through some of my takeaways from the past weekend, and I want to know what yours are down in the comments below, and let me know if you agree, disagree, or what your thoughts are. And please do smash like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. And let's get into it, shall we? Right, so this is actually touching me in my soul. Had the Lions held on to beat Leinster, they would be preparing for a URC playoff. That is how close they actually eventually became to making the playoffs. And it's interesting because for me the season goes down to the failure from a Lions perspective. It does, and yet they have improved from last season. They've gotten more points, and they've finished one place outside the playoffs, 3 points behind the Sharks. So yeah, it's really, really frustrating because we should have beaten Leinster and we didn't. And had we beaten Leinster, we would be in the we'd be in the playoffs. And for a team with the resources with the Sharks compared to the Lions, for that to even be a conversation is pretty worrying for the Sharks. But it does show you that there's potential in this Lions team and who can play some very good rugby when they want to. So I'm hoping that in the off-season, if there's a little bit more investment and a bit more sort of strategy and some good recruitment, this Lions team should be making the playoffs next season. It has to be the goal. And it's not even that unrealistic because they've come so close this season despite all the issues they've had. So if they can just have a slightly more normal season next season, continue progressing, I don't see why in a year's time we're not going to see the Lions in the playoffs of the URC for the first time. Right, so whilst they did get a bonus point victory against Benton this weekend, I'm a bit worried about the Stormers' form at the moment. I don't think in the last month we've seen the Stormers side that we saw over the previous months, who just when they're at home especially look unbeatable because they have not been beaten at home. And momentum for me, I always emphasize that momentum is quite an important thing, and I still maintain it. And I worry about the Stormers going into the playoffs. They're not currently playing their best rugby, so it's interesting because they've got a very good record over the Bulls. Um, so they'll be backing themselves to get the job done against the Bulls. But after that, could very well be going over to play against Leinster and Ulster in the semi-finals. They were playing probably against Ulster if Ulster and Leinster do go through. So it will be an away semi-final, which is going to make it difficult for the Stormers. I don't know what it is, and again, I don't know what you do. Do you play a couple of your stars in the Currie Cup on the weekend to try and get them into a bit of form, a bit of momentum, or do you just trust that whilst they haven't been the best couple of performances, there've been some good moments and they can get the run running against the Bulls? I don't know. A month ago, I would have said that the Stormers looked like a side that were only going to be beaten by Leinster, and now I look at them, I think they can be beaten by other teams, unless they can sort of regain that form that they had earlier in the season. Now, once again, it's very easy to brush aside the last two Bulls results, where they hammered Zebra and hammered Leinster to finish with 165 points difference. Points difference that was sitting, I think, well below 65 before the last 2 weeks. You cannot, however, deny that scoring plus 60 points 2 weeks in a row is not going to give you momentum. It's not going to give you confidence. And going into playoffs, as I said, momentum is such an important thing. Confidence is such an important thing. And I do think that the Bulls, all of a sudden, with a bit of momentum, might go down to the Stormers and down to Cape Town and believe that they can do it, because why not? At the end of the day, they just need that one big performance and they can find themselves in another semi-final. Remember they were a couple of points away from winning the entire league last season. And whilst they've lost a lot of players, I think they have brought a couple of nice players in, and there's definitely been a bit of progress in certain players. They've just been very inconsistent, and we're never quite sure which Bulls side will rock up. But if the best Bulls side rocks up and they play well, they can get a job done. all the investment, all the Springboks, all the resources, all the support, all the right reasons to do well. And the Sharks have finished 8th. They've actually won fewer points than last season, and have at this stage missed out on a spot in the Champions Cup unless they were to go on and win the Rugby Champ, the URC, which looks pretty unlikely. They're going to have to go away to Leinster for the semi-final. Be interested to see, if we saw an example, when they'll go over, whether they'll actually go over this week and try and have a proper week over there and really have it a good go. Because obviously traveling has been a massive issue for the South African sides. So with a 2-week break, you kind of don't have an excuse not to be able to travel well. We're not going to. You can't be traveling next week Tuesday and then complaining about the travel issues, for example. So at least the nice thing is they can get over there nice and early. And chances are, once they're over in Ireland, if they were to do the impossible and beat Leinster, they could be taking on an Ulster, for example, or they could be taking on there's a lot of European teams there, so chances are they'll be able to stay in Europe for another week, and if they were to be able to win that, then it's just very likely they're going to stay in Europe if they were to keep winning. So at least travel, for example, should be quite straightforward for the Sharks. They've got the time to get over there and get ready, but it's difficult to understand why it's going wrong. You look at like 12, 13 Springboks on that side, they can name almost 23 with players who've got international experience. It's ridiculous. You look at their centre depth, for example, and you've got Benta Pawai, Ryan Fernandez, Francois Fenta, Lekanda as your 4 centre options. Both your loose heads in the union have played in this for the Springboks in the last year. You've got international quality in every single position, and yet they've really struggled to make the playoffs. As I said, if the Lions won one more game, they would have actually not made the playoffs. And this does not go in the Champions Cup. So it's very frustrating that despite all the resources they're underperforming, I think lots has to change structurally before next season if they are to try and turn what is supposed to be like almost like a Man City of rugby. This bank, this wealth of resources, and yet no performances. I don't know what needs to change in terms of coaching staff and stuff, but something has to. And that's going to be a big sort of task in the next couple of months. Right, so this is an interesting one because at the moment, Irish rugby is probably in one of the best positions it's ever been in terms of a strength perspective. You've got Leinster at the top, who you just can't at this stage just look like they're leagues ahead of the rest. Ulster sort of snuck into that second place very nicely. Storm was kind of throwing it away a little bit with that loss to Munster, but that I think also shows you the class of Munster who have really improved this season. They did get knocked out by the Sharks, for example, in the Champions Cup, but. And Connacht as well, improving, getting themselves into 7th. So, 4 Ireland teams in the Champions Cup next season is going to be a very, very good result for them. However, I think that the South African sides can start to look at what's working for Ireland and how they can sort of try and emulate certain parts of that. Now, it's very different sort of position and very different sort of structures. We go from the academy structure that Ireland got versus, the sort of the junior structures that South African teams have. But if we are seeing more and more South African sides retaining players, which we're not seeing a lot. I mean, Khaleesi, for example, Thomas Toy going overseas, but in the same breath, they've signed Vincent Koch. So it looks like the South African teams, there's rumors about PSF Toy going back to Cape Town. We're definitely going to have more pull to be able to bring players back and to be able to keep more players. There will obviously still be players moving over, but I don't see why within the next 2-3 years, we might not see all 4 South African teams in that top 8. And especially if you start really using that home ground advantage to the best of our abilities, I think the South African teams could really become the dominant force in the URC. I think it's between us and the Irish teams. Glasgow Warriors have thrown themselves in the mix. Benton are a team on the rise, but even they're sort of finishing down in the 11th. And the Welsh teams, the Cardiff being the highest finishes for them in 10th. But those are my takeaways. Let me know what you thought of the weekend and whether you agree with my statements down below. Please do smash like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steven, and I'll chat to you soon.